Nikita showing up into an environment like that looks like all of the things that make me me. I'm a Black woman and I'm a public health professional,
Mhm.
millennial. I am the product of a broken home. I'm the child of an immigrant. I lost a parent to cancer in my early 20s as I was just kind of starting to come into myself as
Mm.
an adult. And that person growing up in the South in the United States shows up to situations like the one you just described in a certain way. And some of those characteristics I find are shared amongst other women who can relate to some of the experiences that I've had or similarly.
Welcome to the Seasons and Stewardship Podcast, the podcast where we discuss the ups and downs of leadership and life.
Well, thank you so much, Nikita Toppin Dera, for being with us here today.
Thank you, Belinda. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Tell me if this resonates. Let us know in the comments. So, minority female leader, boss, making moves, has been climbing the corporate ladder or the nonprofit ladder or whatever it is over years, and is doing really well, is connecting with her team, making just powerful moves, making great strategies for the company. When she goes home, it is difficult, for lack of a better word. When she goes home, it is hard to connect with those in her household. Here, a spouse and children. What are some of the reasons that you see? I know I have some, but what are some reasons that you see it being hard for minority female leaders, especially, to be vulnerable at home, to make those connections?
Well, the
Start out
first
with
thing
the
that
hard
comes
question.
the first thing that comes to mind, I love these types of questions actually because it's a fun little exercise. It's talk therapy in a sense. So I'm
Mhm.
gonna only be able to tell you from my perspective, but what it allows me to do is kind of step outside of myself, turn around, and ask myself this question.
Mm.
And I also get to, look me down from head to toe and assess how I'm showing up in that space. And that's really what comes to mind to me first. um, Nikita showing up into an environment like that looks like all of the things that make me me. I'm a Black woman and I'm a public health professional,
Mhm.
millennial. I am the product of a broken home. I'm the child of an immigrant. I lost a parent to cancer in my early 20s as I was just kind of starting to come into myself
Mm.
as an adult. And that person growing up in the South in the United States shows up to situations like the one you just described in a certain way. And some of those characteristics I find are shared amongst other women who can relate to some of the experiences that I've had or similarly. And unfortunately, some of the way in which I show up into a space like that has rendered me in pursuit of vulnerability that allows me to show up um, well enough, conscious enough of my being to be
Mhm.
able to say what I need in that moment in order to function. And it's
Mhm.
I start there in kind of like this primitive space because it feels like it is kind of just stripped down, bare bones. Like who shows up into a space determines, in my opinion, how in which you interact with that environment and
Mm.
what you're equipped with or not equipped with. You gotta be able to name that. So, a thorough analysis of me would say that vulnerability is counterproductive or counterintuitive to what I've experienced
Mhm.
in 38 years. Um, but interestingly enough, I've had this perfect storm of disruption continuous disruptive activities that have that made me a parent twice in 2020, both just before a pandemic and right in the middle of one. And in my household as well, I have a spouse and we both began working from home. For the first time, we are spending a lot of time together all day with a newborn and a pregnancy in the middle of what feels like the end of the world. And so that kind of thrust and catapult me into this space where if I had not been really seeing myself from a helpful way or being like able to kind of call things out, I didn't have a choice if I wanted to survive, but to be able to do that. So I show up a very long-winded way of saying I show up um afraid of being my stripped down self.
Mhm, mhm. Mm.
Yeah.
There's so many things that you said. One of the words that you said, Nikita, though, was function. And when you said that, like I automatically related. But one of the things that I've just wrestled with is what was modeled to us.
Mm.
Like I feel like racial minority women, but especially Black women, right? Because that's what I know more. Um, we've almost been taught, whether verbally or by observation, to struggle. We've been taught to function in the midst of struggle. And not just to function, but to keep it inside
Mhm.
and not focus so much on what your experience, but just get through it. Just
Mhm.
persevere. Just hold it together. Hold the family together. Just keep going. And you probably know this better than me when we're thinking about physiology. You can only keep going for so long until it starts to wear on your mind, right? Your body, and impacts others around you. One of the things that I don't know if you have any thoughts about that before I go on. Mm.
Yes. Right.
One of the
Yes,
things
right.
one of the things that one of the reasons that this platform, this podcast exists is I am concerned about racial minority
Mhm.
leaders, women
Mhm.
leaders, um, because of the load that we carry
Yeah.
mentally, physically, emotionally, and also the isolation that can
Yeah.
come when you don't feel like there's other people who get it. That's why I know right now there are people who are
Oh,
listening, resonating completely, resonate, and someone's talking about it. So when you have a leader who has learned to be high functioning,
mm,
because you have to be,
mm.
and is not able to get the social or emotional connection, the intimacy that they need, it's gonna affect both sides. It's gonna
Mhm.
affect home.
Mhm.
And eventually, at some point, it's gonna affect work.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I feel like sometimes, like, of the 2, we care more about keeping work
Mm.
going, like the leadership going, or maybe it's me.
Yes.
Maybe I'm speaking for
No, so 2 things. I'm so glad that my mom comes up early in this conversation because when you talk about what has been modeled, you
Mhm,
know, all things all things, Jim Crow, the first, person, Black woman, first part of the first integrated class in
mhm,
her county. Um, she remembers a different type of experience, as
mhm,
a Black woman professional in the making.
Mhm.
And I think about all of the touch points that helped her chip away through, her own personal ceiling that she persevered through.
Mhm.
And mm, those kind of firsts in families, especially generationally, first one to go to college. I'm now the second one in my family to go to college. Um, but there are some old habits that are proving to die very, very hard.
Mhm.
And what has changed in a generation, um, I'll be careful to miss if I don't turn around and really analyze what was modeled for me. Because stepping out, turning around, looking at myself and asking the question that you posed earlier also um, makes me beg the question.
Mhm.
So, do you like what you see? Is it working for you? Um, you know, does that remind you of somebody? And a lot of the things
Mhm.
and behaviors that I exhibit remind me of Veronica, God rest her soul. She was a great mother. There's a
Mhm.
lot of things she got wrong, and it was only because she was
Mhm.
in the midst of her own struggle, dealing with the cards that were handed to her. But
Yeah.
w aside from a thorough analysis, how do you weed through some of that stuff?
Mhm. Mhm.
But my point is, self-care
Mhm.
for me right now
Mhm.
is me saying, "You deserve to get your teeth cleaned."
It would be real. So
It
bad.
says I mean, and it's literally what's plaguing me right now, okay? It says, as I sit on the couch because I need to take a 15-minute rest, um, and there might be a lot of folks around, I'm not gonna name no names, Wally, a lot of folks around asking questions, wondering why you just sitting there. I don't wanna answer you. I don't wanna explain why, I just know I need to rest right now,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna do that regardless of what else needs to be done, regardless of
Mhm.
what you want or what you need. And
Mhm.
I'm also not going to feel guilty about it. I'm gonna resist the urge to feel like I don't deserve to sit down for 15 minutes because I have a hard time doing that anyway. And if I can
Mhm.
actually convince myself to do it,
Mhm.
I'm not gonna be made to feel bad about it. We have to resist the urge to feel guilty about taking time out for ourselves. And anybody who needs to really understand that, we've gotta find some gall. We've gotta
Mhm.
find some courage, and I know that that looks different for everybody, so I'm not saying
Mhm.
for you to just go start knucking and bucking, you know what I
Mhm.
mean, with you and the people in your house, but I know for me, I
Mhm.
had to start vocalizing that in a very specific way, and
Mhm.
then vocalizing to myself, "You said 15 minutes, it hasn't been 15 minutes, take them 15 minutes and enjoy those 15 minutes."
Mhm.
Not thinking about what
Okay.
you're doing at minute 16.
Y'all, I
Stop
know people
apologizing.
are relating. I know they're relating. It's the same. It's the same story. But I love that you are giving strategy, right? And ladies, it's 15 minutes. What are you like? What are you gonna save? Who are you gonna save? What
Mm.
country are you gonna liberate in 15 minutes? Sit down.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sit
Mhm.
down.
Mhm.
You have to be rested for you. Yes, for family. Yes, for employees. Yes, for like all the man, but like you have to center and focus on you. You have to. And
And do it
part of like,
unapologetically.
absolutely. Because it's that what you said was just such a, it was facts that you can be sitting pretending to rest, giving the appearance of rest, because that is part of what we do. We put on masks.
Mhm. Mm.
We pretend. We pretend we're okay and keep pushing.
I'm not okay. I am not okay. I ain't got no more pretend left in me.
Mhm.
And, when I unfortunately, we got to not okay in a very unhealthy, unproductive way. And
Mhm.
now a lot of the work that I could have been doing
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
getting okay and being okay. I'm doubling back, and for me, it's just I'm grateful that I'm finally at an impasse or have reached a
Mhm.
place where I'm ready and willing and actively doing something about it. But accountability has
Mhm.
been a huge part of that. And
Mhm.
vulnerability, I've never really had a hard time telling people what I'm feeling.
Mhm.
But accountability is, um it's hard for people who always have, an explanation for things, and I'm one of those people. I always have an explanation,
Mhm.
and I've worked it out. Trust me, I have ADHD. I have worked it out, all the scenarios. I've got all the I've got everything but the solution. And at some point, you just gotta have a real conversation with yourself. How long have you known that this is a problem? How long have you known that this is something that needs improvement?
Mhm.
Sometimes you need to, if accountability is a hard thing for you, you gotta be willing to seek that accountability.
Mhm.
My mom used to say, you've done well in life if you find yourself one good friend. And that one good friend is gonna put your deadlines on their calendar. I have a number of deadlines for some of my girlfriends on my calendars, and I
Mhm.
have one non-negotiable. When I get alerts about certain things that are on my calendars for certain people, they get a reminder right then. Doesn't matter
Mhm.
what I'm doing. As soon as I see it, I have to stop, and that is the commitment I made to someone else, and
Mhm.
because I can do it for someone else because that's how I trick myself. I do the things that I need to do for myself for other people, and I work it out with somebody who can do the same for me. Um, but we need one another.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
this season, I am holding on to what my mom said, find yourself one good friend. If there's somebody who's always been in your corner and
Mhm.
and you ain't been treating them right, you ain't been a good friend to them, go be a good friend to them.
Yeah.
Start by giving a little bit if you can. There's somebody else that needs the same kind of help you do, and y'all work through it together and talk about it together. And if you can trust one more person one more time, because we know that that is triggering for a lot of
Mhm.
people to be open up about stuff. But if you can trust one more person
Yeah.
one more time, maybe, with the right combination of information and, some due diligence in who you're choosing,
Mhm. Mhm.
you might find yourself in this relationship of reciprocity that
Yeah.
you all can help each other out. They love to
Mhm.
talk about these boots and these straps and stuff that sometimes we don't
Mhm.
have. But if you ever need to climb out of a hole, sometimes two people can work their way and shimmy their way up little by
Mhm.
little by
Mhm.
leveraging, on one another. So, accountability is it right now for me. And I know that there's some things that I just simply wouldn't be accountable to if somebody didn't know that I was struggling with it.
Mhm.
And I'd be willing to open up.
I love that. I absolutely love that. There's again so much to unpack there. I love that you brought in the accountability in addition to the vulnerability, and I think at the center of that is relationships and how we're
Mm,
navigating relationships, how who we're in relationship with, and the ability to rely on others, which sometimes people feel like they don't have at
mm,
all. And that very well could be the case. You might be in a season where you're like, Belinda, Nikita, like I don't know who that accountability person is. It's
mhm,
not there's not people at home, but they're not gonna So, I mean, it's I that's a real thing. One of the things that you said really got me thinking about mental health and
mm,
being willing to identify
mm,
and be honest with yourself. I think that's really where it starts when you're not okay. So
mhm,
I teach. I teach. Um and on the first day of class, there's standard things that you have to go through with the university. You have to talk about safety, and usually it was just like physical safety. Now we talk a lot about like mental and psychological safety, which is good, which is good.
yeah,
And I teach heavy subjects. So I teach a lot about violence prevention, all types of violence, child abuse, sexual violence, all the heavy things. And on day one, I'm telling the students about like counseling services and things that are on campus that are free for them to be able to use. They might not always know about it. Um, and, I'm talking to them and I'm kind of like reading the room and
Mm,
they're listening, but they almost feel a little guarded, right?
mm,
And this is day one as I'm talking to them about counseling services. And I remember saying, um, make sure that you check on your friends that seem okay,
mm,
not just the ones that don't seem okay.
mm,
And then I said, because I had suicide ideation for a while and everyone would have thought I was okay.
mhm,
And that's when I could see the room kind of open
mhm,
up.
mhm, mhm,
So one of the things that I love is just, and I love this about yourself, is just having honest conversations. Because if we can't be honest, I might as well go take a nap. I might as well, there's other things. We're busy.
mm,
We are busy women. There
mm.
are many
Yes,
things that we could be doing right now, right?
many
But if we
things.
can't be honest about what we're going through, what we've
Mhm,
gone through and successfully gone through,
mm.
and knowing what our sisters are struggling with, and then what's the point? So for those of you listening, you have to be honest with where you are mentally. And that means taking a pause and not just stuffing your calendar
Mm.
so that you can actually be true with yourself. I don't care if
Gotta
you're
check in.
journaling.
Gotta check
You gotta
in.
check in with yourself. I
Check
don't care if you're
in, honey.
journaling. I don't care if you're going for a walk, to be honest.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
care how you do it, whatever makes sense for you, but you have to check in with yourself because before you can have vulnerability, before you can have accountability, you have to know where you are and you have to be willing to say, I'm not okay. I'm not okay.
And the hardest part is really I don't find the hardest part being able to talk to myself and being honest
Mhm,
with myself.
mhm,
Like all people have blind spots, so it's
mhm,
not there's always a willingness to be confronted with whatever I see.
mhm,
I still have the choice to do something about it or not, and sometimes I don't. It's stubbornness. But I feel like I have a good like read and sense. I think what I find the hardest step after that
mhm,
is pushing past the lie that you are alone. Because
mm,
that is where I start making up all the excuses like, if I call this person, they're not
mhm,
gonna understand. If I call this person,
mm,
it'll probably, if that person could turn into this person, it's just all of these other things, these what ifs, these scenarios
mhm,
that, for those who have challenges with worrying,
mhm,
most of those scenarios never happen. And it
mhm,
wasn't until recently where I was just like, all of the things that I'm concerned about didn't even happen. I'm like, "Oh, girl, yeah, you need to
mhm,
you're gonna have to check in about that." Like,
mhm, mhm,
you're the problem. We keep looking around and we're like, "Oh, honey, all this time, yeah, the man in the mirror."
mhm, mhm,
And when you, it's not cliche when people say most of these things don't happen.
mhm,
It's because
mhm,
they're right. When you finally have that aha moment with yourself. You also have to, remember to deploy that when you're in that
mhm,
moment of, a critical decision making, that matrix. Should you call someone or not call someone? And
mhm,
when I tell myself that they're not, you sound silly, they're not gonna be able to help you, or they're not, or the shame is too much, or you're too scared, of what they might think. Try them, you know, try it because now I say it so much and I'm like, yeah, that didn't happen.
mhm,
So why not take a chance? The worst thing that could happen is that they can't help you. Okay.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
But the best thing that could happen is that they could. And I think that there's
Yeah,
a chance there, which you'll never know if you don't try. So it's
yeah.
that, it, should I call someone? Should I do this? Should I
Mhm,
take a next step?
mhm, mhm.
Yes.
Yes, yeah,
Take a next step.
yeah,
It can be a small one. It could be even a Terry. Just keep moving in direction. But there's something about identifying someone even ahead of time when you're not in crisis to be able to
yeah.
say, hey, if I call you in the middle of the night or if I send you a text, look, I'm gonna just hit you with one of these. It could be your go-to emoji.
Mhm.
For
Mhm.
me, I call on people in the middle of the night for prayer.
Mhm.
Um, and there's only a handful that I know will get to work and
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
ask any questions that are not pertinent to their ability to be able to intercede on my behalf. Sometimes
Yeah.
I can't even get a word out, but they know to start praying. That
Mhm.
list is already known. That's not
Mhm.
something I'm trying to go through my Rolodex, when I'm in the middle of crisis trying to figure out. You need to know who your team is. Figure
Yeah.
out who that
Yeah.
is, because you don't wanna be figuring it out in the middle of crisis. And then when you're in that place, deploy.
Mhm.
Send
Use
out
it.
that SOS. Send out the
Mhm.
SOS, and sometimes it's, "I just need you to pray."
Mhm.
And the ones I know, they get right to it, and that's where I
Mhm.
have to faith for me is a cornerstone of how
Mhm.
I operate my life,
Mhm.
and it's a firm foundation for me, so everything that I think of and the way I respond and react to is gonna be centered in some sort of faith positioning. But there are still more not just there are practical things, and being able to reach out to someone if you're not asking them for prayer,
Mhm.
um, maybe, if you feel like you can, say,
Mhm.
"I'm having a challenging day, and I
Mhm.
need to clear my head," if it's someone that you work with, that
Mhm.
might be pushing just a little bit into the vulnerable, but I've had to tell my manager a few times, "I need to just, I need to just go offline for a little while. Can you cover things?"
Mhm.
Um, that's a display of strength in my opinion. It's a vulnerable, um of course, there's protocol for everyone, and being able to take some time, but I'm gonna use my time at work as well for
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
doesn't that if I have sick time, if I have leave time, I don't always wanna just be thinking about this vacation that I'm gonna have at some point. I
Mhm.
might need, like,
Mhm.
a few of those hours right now, and being able to say, "I need to clear, myself, I need to take a little bit of a break." Sometimes that's the text message, you know what I mean, that you
Mhm.
send out
Mhm.
in the company with the request for prayer and also
Mhm.
send out the
Mhm.
and give yourself some space to just process
Mhm.
until you
Mhm.
know what the next step is.
I love that. I love the strategy. One of the things that you said at the top is um, being concerned that people will understand or they won't respond or those sorts of things. And one of the first things that comes to my mind is sometimes we do that as a defense mechanism.
Mm,
Like we do that to shield ourselves, but also sometimes to give ourselves excuse. And I'm saying this about me as well,
mm,
right? I know others done that, but give ourselves excuse to not act, right? And there could be a lot of reasons that comes from, as I said before, like a lot of my work that I do, my day in, my day out, my research, my training in communities is centered around trauma and centered around like the things that we go through in our childhood. And so sometimes we have a natural, like when you've gone through what we call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, when you've gone through several different factors, like your natural inclination can be to shield, right? And it's not
mm,
just those that have gone through like severe trauma, but it can be to shield. And so I love that you gave an example of like this is what I was doing. I came to recognize it, which recognition keeps coming up, like having that check in, being that, real with yourself. And then the strategy was this, right? And so Nikita's strategy might work for you. It might not work for you, but just having having something in place beforehand is going to be incredibly important, right? Whether it is dealing with a crisis, or you just need to process something that happened that day. I mean,
yes.
leadership leadership is lonely.
Mm,
You can't I mean, it could be a personal issue, it could be something at work, like, leadership is lonely, and doesn't mean that your spouse, your children, even if they're adult children, are gonna understand, you can't talk to your staff, and the higher up you go, the more you have to have that, um, exude that strength and that competence, and I know what the company's going and where it's going and all these different things. And so again, you have to, in those types of roles, it's common to shield yourself or to have that sort of
Yes.
mask, um, and not lean into the vulnerability and the accountability aspect. And so it's important to have good, good girlfriends who are also bosses in their own spaces, which is why I have
Yes.
me and Nikita.
Well, and that's why I have me a Belinda, and I'm so glad that you brought in adverse childhood experiences because as a a leader who struggles with oversharing,
Mhm,
this is another moment of vulnerability.
mhm,
Struggle with oversharing because of my brain chemistry and the way that I feel, and
mhm,
the way that I lead is
mhm,
often rooted in very it comes from very emotional places as
mhm, mhm,
my center and core and my core value systems. But interestingly,
mhm,
in my leadership training, I have brought over some lessons. And one of the things that I stand by very firmly is not making decisions when I'm upset. And
mhm. That's good.
that's specifically why I called out, if you need to be vulnerable in your ask for needing space and time.
Mhm,
And that works with my manager because when I need to sleep on something, sometimes I fight the urge, especially I think one of the things that some of the people pleasing I think that comes with is something that is a shared experience I have with a lot of people who have similar backgrounds as I.
mhm,
And people pleasing sometimes maybe pushes you to, quickly address something in order
mhm,
to stay in good graces or always be on the
mhm,
mark. But
mhm,
sometimes being on the mark is the strength to say, "I need to sleep on that. Let me get back
mhm,
to you about
mhm,
that, because I need to process these feelings, and I probably am gonna feel differently about it once I give myself some space for it to clear out."
mhm,
And that is another reason why, deploying, your, prayer squad, if
mhm, mhm,
you are a faith person,
mhm,
and that gives you room and space to kind of air out and process.
mhm,
Um, and one of the adverse childhood experiences that I think feeling triggered about needing to respond and immediately jump on something or shield, like you said, comes from
mhm,
abandonment, and that is my fight, flight, freeze, all of those
mhm,
things,
mhm,
that's my freeze, that's my fight.
mhm,
Over abandonment, it generally is centered around that. So that is something I learned about myself.
mhm,
If you don't know the things that trigger you, then it's hard to even think about what would be a plausible um strategy that
mhm, mhm,
fits the types of responses you're gonna have in leadership settings or even in your home.
mhm,
But that one has worked really well for me, letting it air out, take a
mhm,
step outside, call someone, meet up with your girls, you know, work it out with them, and then go home or go to work and take it to your professional setting as well. And if you've got folks around you who can
mhm,
relate to where you are, especially in leadership position, that's
mhm.
one less thing that you have to work through because you know that the advice they're
Yeah,
gonna give you is going to be, centered from a similar place because they're
yeah,
interacting, um, at the same level in their circle. So,
yeah.
thank you for that reminder.
No, like, it's been so powerful for me to hear you, process and talk through, the example because it wasn't until maybe a month ago, maybe 6 weeks, that I really started to link my, giving especially, like, when it comes to deadlines, giving people a deadline that I thought was acceptable at my own
Mhm,
detriment in
mhm.
terms of, like, my sleep, my rest, my ability to
Oh my
handle
gosh,
with
I relate
people
to that.
pleasing
Mhm.
and with, like, being rooted in
Oof.
trauma. It was not until recently, and I've had to really start implementing at work.
Mm,
And it was yes, it was like those senior to me, those on the same level, but also sometimes my staff being too available for my
Mm,
staff.
mm.
And yeah, that it was a
Wow.
light bulb. So I love that practical thing because I don't know if many people have that connection. And I'm sitting here teaching on trauma and ACEs, like
Mhm.
reading people in the counties, and I didn't realize that about myself until recently. But
That's
um,
good. It's
yeah,
good
I've
to know.
really, yes,
That is very good
yes.
to know.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm still working through it. Like I've steadily, like I said, it's been like 4 or 6 weeks. So I've steadily been working through it, asking for more help where I need to,
Mm,
where we've been like
mhm.
shorter in staff, like, no, we actually need to pull someone else in, or that deadline can't be be
So
met.
let me ask you, how does
Mhm.
it feel to come to that realization and be challenging yourself to now
Mm,
recognize that you've got a new goalpost? How has it been just being inside of the reality that,
yeah.
you know, change should happen for you to be
Mhm.
strengthened?
Yeah. You know, it at first, like, it was like, okay, this aha awakening, like, why at 38
Mm,
have I not noticed about myself? But it was like, okay, now thinking as a strategist, what is the next step? And it was freeing, definitely. But just trying to think about what does the strategy look like for me? Like, how do I voice this? How do I put this in writing?
mm,
Especially when you start to recognize that you could be around, and this is across like a lot of different settings. So I like, I wear many different hats, many different organizations, many different roles, but you're around other people who, it's going to start conflict, if that makes sense. So it's not
mm,
just like the initial no or the initial, um, yes, but at this time, but also pre-thinking how will I respond when this person isn't emotionally
mm,
stable
mhm,
and will have thoughts about me pushing back, right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
so it's been incremental. It's still, again, very recent, but it's been good. It's been good
mhm,
to be self aware of that.
mhm.
And, I feel like in life, hopefully, we have the opportunity or we allow ourselves to have the opportunity to keep learning. I'm sure there's
Yeah,
still blind spots that I am, not aware of, but the fact that we're giving ourselves permission to learn and grow and, and be better, but it was definitely a weight lifted in the sense of like, now
mhm,
I can do something. But I will say to get to that point, I had to really crash, which is not ideal. I don't
mhm,
want anybody else to crash.
mhm, mhm,
I crashed. I was like, I can't do it
mhm.
all. I can't. We cannot do everything, right? And so, right now it's okay, how do I manage the commitments that I said
Yeah,
6 weeks ago that are still on
yeah,
my plate,
yeah.
right? So it's not like the commitments have fallen
Go
off, like,
away.
it's still on my
It's
plate.
still
I
there.
have this
It's still
epiphany, but they're
waiting.
still there. So it's
Woo!
just how
Sometimes
do
you do
I
wish they kinda poof, but
yes. So how do I negotiate it? So, for
Mm,
example, earlier this week, I was like, "Actually, I can't attend that meeting." I
mm,
really like it's not a meeting where I'm integral, you know what I mean? Like, I don't actually need to be at that meeting. I need
mhm,
bandwidth to do some other
mhm.
things. And so being able to communicate that and just be like, "I really don't care what you think about
And
outcome,"
it's also me,
because
like, relinquishing control because that was part of my that's part that
yeah,
remain part of my
yes.
challenge and issue,
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
need to control,
Mhm. Mm.
but
Mhm.
trust
Mhm.
has to
Absolutely.
has to go along with that, or else, you could be freeing yourself from actually physically being there, but then your follow-up, you know what I mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
backfills the space you just created for yourself.
Absolutely.
Am I talking to you?
It's rare, and we're working at it, ladies, we're working at it step by
We're
step,
working it.
right? But the first step is awareness,
Oh,
right? That's
yes, it
why you
is.
have Auntie Nikita.
Listen, auntie is one of my favorite titles, hats that I'm wearing in the season. It is
I love it.
man, I would I feel like I need to have like Ja Rule. Where would I be without my aunties? Like I would never be who I
Mhm.
am without the strong women who stood by my mother, that
Mhm.
continue to parent me.
Mhm.
The sisterhood, that's where
Mhm.
you get what you need. That's where you're gonna get what you need. I'm telling you.
Mhm.
Find you an auntie. If you are an auntie, be better. Be better.
Check in more.
You know, and
Be
and
honest.
and also
Be
and
real
let somebody
honest.
else be an auntie to you. Let somebody else be
Yeah.
an auntie to you. It's good to have a mentor. It's good to have
Mhm.
someone who's walked a different aspect of life a little bit differently than you or more than
Mhm.
you or, by whatever, way in which you judge good has done it better than you.
Mhm.
Let somebody be an auntie to you.
Mhm. See those blind spots that we keep talking about
I'm telling you,
and not
free
afraid to tell you
yourself.
about it.
Free your mind. Free your mind. Okay.
I love it. I love it. Well, Nikita, this has been a wonderful conversation. It's definitely a part 1. This is
Mhm.
because there's so much to unpack here. This was just the appetizer, y'all. This is
Oh,
it's so much to
I live
unpack.
here. This is my address.
Well, are there any parting words or anything that you think the amazing, wonderful women listening, yes, you listening, despite whatever you're going through, wonderful women that have a purpose, anything else that you think that they need to hear or any other parting thoughts?
Uh, Depending on when you hear this, um, I'm willing to guess there's a lot going on around you. Because there's a lot going on around me right now. But what has given me so much calm right in the midst is truly believing that my purpose is on purpose. And if I'm here, there's some work that I need to do. And that energizes me no matter what's going on around me. And it incentivizes me to choose me when it's time to rest, when it's time to heal, because I want to live purpose filled on purpose and I want to do it well. And the only way I can do it is if I show up well. So be encouraged to incentivize your rest. Rest. Get your mind right.
Mhm,
Love on somebody. Check
mhm,
in on somebody, like you said.
mhm, mhm.
Let somebody check in on you.
Right there. Someone checking on you. Thank you. Thank you. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. And she will be back. Whether she wants to or not, she'll be back. Well, thank you. Well, thank you, ladies, for listening. And we look forward to being a part of your journey and check in next week. Take care.